And welcome to a special edition of the Reigns on the Cardinals podcast here on STLSportsPage.com. Mike Raines, Rob Raines. We purposely waited to bring you this edition on a very snowy and very cold Saturday afternoon in St. Louis. I know it's not just St. Louis; it's dealing with the effects of some bad winter storms. So hopefully everybody is safe and warm wherever you are.
I'm sure you have already started the countdown to when you leave for spring training. You're very close.
Well, I can tell you two things. Number one, the suitcases are out in the extra guest room, getting ready to be packed. And the forecasted high today in Jupiter was 78 degrees with a high of 81 on Sunday. Those poor people are going to have to suffer the rest of the week, though, because it's only going to be in the mid 60s for highs for the rest of the week down in Jupiter. So while we're freezing, we've actually had Sally and I had to relocate to bring you this edition of the show over to our friends at the Drury Hotels in St. Louis because of the fact that our furnaces decided to not work during this cold spell. So we taking advantage of our friendship with the Drurys and moved over here. So we're nice and safe and toasty here. So
very thankful for the 4 degrees outside.
Very cold and expecting a bout of snow on Sunday. So we need a little Cardinal baseball to warm everybody up. We'll give you the particulars about some spring training news and spring training news and don'ts for everybody that whether you're thinking about coming down to Florida just because of the cold weather or you're just going to be with us in spirit. There's a view of the Juneau Beach. So, yeah, book your plane tickets now and your reservation at the Homewood Suites Palm Beach Gardens. February 12th, the first official catcher and pitcher workout for the club. February 16th, the first full squad workout. First game scheduled for February 21st as we count down to March 26th in the season opener at Busch Stadium against Tampa Bay. I promise it'll be warmer than it is in St. Louis this weekend. Of course, part of the
it could be snowing. You never know, though.
Oh, you never know, but it's still going to be warmer. I guarantee you, it probably won't be zero. Might have snowed. Yes, we have had games snowed out in St. Louis in March and April before. But because part of the thing to discuss about spring training as well, Mike, is that we don't know when the pitchers and catchers work out for that first day what the facility is going to be like because there are so many things going on still with the stadium being under construction. Our good friend Kevin Jurgens is already down in Florida and sent us some pictures of what's going on. And I know sometimes you can't tell a lot from the pictures. That's sod that has to be laid out. That's what those big rolls are in the parking lot. If people are familiar with spring training, that's part of the players' parking lot that has been the staging ground for all the construction vehicles. So it's going to be very much of a work in progress. I don't think we were told by Hein Bloom and some of the other people during the winter warm-up that they are aware of the deadlines. They are working around the clock, basically trying to get things ready, and that they're told that it will be ready enough to have spring training, but of course, maybe not 100% ready to go, and they'll still be working on stuff during the year. So I guess the motto is we're going to, of course, have all of our spring training reports, spring training coverage once we get down to Jupiter. But the motto is if you're coming down to Florida, just be patient. Just realize that it's still very much of a construction site, and there's going to be work going on that may impact your availability of getting out onto the backfields or maybe doing some of the things that you're used to doing down in spring training. But I think once this project is all said and done, I think it's going to be a big improvement and a big change from what the Cardinals have had down in that area in the last few years.
And when you say patient, I think that's the phrase of the year because it's going to be that way with updates to all with this team right now. It's going to be more of a wait guys. We just have to be patient to see how they develop.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you could use the word renovation for the roster as well as what's going on down at the ballpark. Do you want to mention right off the bat, too, before I forget, if you are making plans to come down to Jupiter, keep the date March the 12th in mind because that's the date of our annual baseball bash at the Homewood Suites. All the details on the spring training tab page on STLSportsPage.com, a fundraiser for Rainbows for Kids here in St. Louis, as well as the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society of Palm Beach County. Always a good time. Hopefully we'll have a couple of players on hand as well after the ball game that day. So check that out if you have a chance to. All the details, of course, on the spring training tab on the STLSportsPage.com, as well as you also, of course, can sign up for our newsletter. And we've got some exciting news in this week's newsletter. We're going to start some new merchandise coming out, and we've got the first shirt about ready to go. So you can get all the details on the newsletter coming up here. If you're not already a subscriber to our newsletter, you can get there easily by go to the Contact Us page of STLSportsPage.com and signed up for the newsletter. So one thing, I guess, Mike, right off the bat, as we talk about the construction of this roster, you and I both are of the opinion, I think, without having discussed this in advance, that there may be at least one, if not two, more trades to come.
I think the biggest question mark right now on this team is Brendan Donovan. Is he here when spring training kicks off? Is he not? I think Hyman and crew are happy if he is there, right? Because he's a good player and he's going to add to this team. But I think they're not going to rule out a trade either. I think we've probably reached a point where the Giants and the Mariners seem to be the top two candidates for him right now. And they've probably reached a point where, hey, this is the offer, take it or leave it. And Heim kind of just, if I'm doing my homework correctly, Heim is just kind of waiting to see if they bump it up a little bit more or if that becomes a good enough deal to take.
There were two items I think of interest the last couple of days, which have happened, not affecting the Cardinals, but I think in a way they do affect the Cardinals, and that is the Washington Nationals trading Mackenzie Gore to the Texas Rangers, getting 5 prospects, 5 of the Rangers' top 30 prospects coming back to the Nationals in that trade. And at the same time, there was some reports in San Francisco that the Giants had been in discussion with the Nationals about their young shortstop, C.J. Abrams, and the fact that they could not agree on a trade. So I can think you can see what the Nationals probably were asking for Abrams based on what they got for Gore. The impact, of course, is if the Giants have been able to get Abrams, their plan was to play him at second base and fill their need at that position. Well, now if that deal is off the table, I think maybe it will rekindle the talks about Brendan Donovan. I think one thing that's probably pretty clear that you can tell without too much supposition here and reading between the lines. I think the Cardinals have figured out what they want from all of these competing clubs for Brendan Donovan, and if they don't get the offer that they're asking for, they're not going to trade him. I think it's a pretty cut and dried situation. So they know what they want. They're going to stick to their guns and make the Giants or the Mariners or whoever it is meet their price, or there won't be a deal.
And I think that's how it should be, because it's not like we're trading a player who's only got a little bit of time left on the contract, or a player that's been average at best. He's an all-star. He's been a good player. I think the only saving grace for Cardinal fans is if you trade Donovan, it means J.J. Weatherholt's getting to come and play quicker, probably, in my opinion. So I think that's where people get excited if they do trade him. But I think the Giants probably don't have the prospects that the Cardinals want. And I think that's the same thing that the Nationals just ran into with C.J. Abrams. They wanted more from a return. They weren't offering it. So are the Mariners, who have a better minor league system, as we'll talk about later, in the top 100, the Mariners had 7 in the top 100 prospects. So there are more guys in that system that would fit the needs of the Cardinals. It's just a question of if they're willing to include them.
And I guess, that's the thing as we get closer to the start of spring training is when teams are going to probably make their decision of we have to do this, or we're going to do this, or we're not going to do this. So I think we'll have resolution to that situation pretty quickly. I really don't think the Cardinals want to go into the start of camp not knowing if Brendan Donovan is going to be on this team or not. Now, JoJo Romero is a little bit of a different case. I think you're going to hear his name still in some more conversations. Obviously, I don't think the return is going to be as significant as it would be for Brendan Donovan, so it's easier to move him at some point. He's a free agent after next year. So that's the other name that we've heard a long time for him. I think you'll still hear leading up into the start of camp if he's available or moved to another club or not.
And the other question mark, too, is Heim has said publicly he still wants a right-handed bat. So whether that's a trade or whether that's a free agent, we don't know. But there are some names still out there. You see Harrison Bader's name still out there. You've seen a few other guys like that. Wouldn't surprise me either. So I would think there's some combination of 3 moves left for the Cardinals.
I think
trading JoJo and trading Donovan.
I have 2 thoughts about that. Number one is the reports I've seen say that Bader's looking for a 3-year contract. I don't think the Cardinals will be interested in doing something like that. I think they're looking for a 1-year deal, no matter who they sign. But I also think this.
I'm not saying he's coming. I'm just saying he's.
No, I understand that. I'm saying I think that he's going to have to come back to them and say he'll take a 1-year deal. And I think the other part of that is if they don't trade Brendan Donovan, and you want J.J. Weatherholt and Thomas Ajayce on this team, I don't know that there's an opening for another bat on the roster.
Well, I think to me, there's 3 positions in question for next year, and it's third base, second base, and left field. And the question comes down to who's on this roster, right? Because if the roster is the way that it sits today, who's the odd man out in the group of Gorman, Sajasi, Nupar, Donovan, and JJ? Somebody's an odd man out of that group because all of this hinges on one other position as well, the catcher.
Yeah, and if Ferreira's catching, it does open up some of those other spots because otherwise he's going to be DHing. And the other thing is, if Ferreira's catching, do you keep 3 catchers or do you only keep 2? Because then that would affect Yoel Pozo. Maybe Pozo is your bat off the bench if nothing is a pinch hitter. But there again, that takes a roster spot. Let's go through. I did a little bit of just kind of looking at the roster and doing a little kind of suppositions about if there is a trade or if there isn't a trade, who might be the Cardinals' opening day lineup. Although I know we got a long way to go, but again, it's 0 degrees and it's snowing outside. So let's talk baseball. So it'll be fun. So we'll go through it and just see if you agree with me. Alec Burleson at first base. I think you can pretty much lock that in. Now this list is assuming that Brendan Donovan is not here, but I see him down left field. Okay, all right. So if you got Burleson at first, yes, you agree with that, Michael?
I would agree. Yes.
Okay, second base. If Donovan's here, I think Donovan plays second base. I've changed my mind since we made up this list here a little bit, but I think Weatherholt plays third. This is also with Arenado being gone now. Gorman, I think, is going to become the DH in this situation if Herrera is able to catch. So if you don't think Herrera can catch, Pages has to catch, then Herrera becomes the DH. Then I think you're looking at Gorman at third. But I think JJ. I think the other part of this too is that if we don't know what Nootbaar's physical status is going to be, so if Donovan is still here, Nootbaar can't play because of the injury, then I think you could see him in left field. You could see Weatherholt at second, Gorman at third, Herrera DH. And so there's still some moving parts there. I think if Donovan does get traded, it does clear up the roster confusion a little bit because then I think you go Burleson, JJ, Weatherholt at second, Gorman or Sajasi at third. If Herrera is catching, then if Sajasi plays third, then Gorman could DH, and your outfield of Nootbaar, Scott, and Walker, assuming again that Nootbaar is healthy. So some interesting decisions to come during the spring.
One of the questions I have constructing this roster lineup: are you favoring home runs, a guy with a higher batting average? Which one cracks the
I would favor a higher batting average. To me, there's more that you can do.
If that's the case, that means Thomas Sajasi should start at third base because he's going to hit for a higher average than Gorman is, but he's not going to hit home runs.
He's going to hit a few, but he's not going to hit a lot.
He's not going to hit 20.
Probably not. Not at least not at this point in his career.
He's not going to strike out 40% of the time.
That's also true.
So do you favor a guy who can get singles and doubles and get on base, or a guy that's going to strike out 40% of the time and hit you 20 to 25 home runs?
I think it all depends on who else is in the lineup. I mean, I also think it depends on who fills out some of those other positions. If Donovan's here, he's your contact on base kind of guy, not going to strike out. You can have a guy who can hit home runs at one of the other spots.
The other guy that we keep talking about, at some point, how long is the leash on Jordan Walker? Because if you get to June and he's not hitting, or you get to July and he's not hitting, does he become your trade piece? And then you keep Donovan and Nootbaar both in right and left. So, I mean, I think there's options there too. But every year we keep talking about Gorman and Walker. And at what point do they figure it out, or do we move on?
I think there is a point. There is a line in the sand probably, but I don't know that it's a firm line in the sand. I think it could be a floating line depending on – and I don't think it's the same line for both players. So I think that's going to be something that we seems like we say it every year. We go to spring training wondering how those guys are going to do, but I also think it's going to be another big question for this year. Maybe not the most important question on the club, but certainly an important question.
When you look at this team currently compared to what they were last year we were eliminated from a playoff spot until the last series, the last 3 games of the year. And I really don't think this team is going to be constructed that much different than they were last year. If anything, I think our pitching is better this year than it was last year.
I think that's where we're going to see more changes. Yeah, in the starting rotation, you don't have Fetty, you don't have Michaelis, you don't have some of those other. You're going to start right now with Libator. I'm not saying these are your 1 through 5 in a particular order, but your 5 starters right now to me are Libator, Michael McGreevy, Dustin May, Richard Fitz, and then a battle for the 5th spot probably between Hunter Dobbins. But again, he's coming off an injury. Kyle Leahy, they want to see him stretch him out and see what he does in the spring. And I think you have to still throw Andre Palante's name into that mix as long as he's here. It's going to be a big spring training for him to see what he can do.
I still wouldn't completely rule out the fact that maybe Leahy becomes your closer now that you have a 5th starter. because that's going to be the question mark of this team. Who's the closer? But where I'm going with that, I don't think you're going to see a lot of games this year where all of a sudden you look up and you're down 6-0 in the first inning that you saw out of Finney and Michaelis multiple times last
year. Yeah, I would tend to agree with that.
I think that, okay, did we lose a little bit offensively in losing Contreras? Sure, I think we did. But I think the battle between Arenado and Gorman really isn't that much different offensively. So I really don't think we lost that much. But the addition of adding JJ into this lineup is going to make a huge difference. And if Nootbaar's healthy, it's going to make a big difference. So I think what I'm getting at is I think this team's going to compete just as well as they did last year and be in contention for a spot more than we think so.
Me, the interesting spot, the decision about JJ is that I think, and again, it's some new people are in charge, new people making decisions, more people involved than have been more in the past. And I understand the reasons why the Cardinals did it when they promoted Jordan Walker to the big league club, straight out of AA, no games in AAA. They had a need. He played well in spring training, but there's no question he was rushed. And the way Chaim Bloom has talked about not wanting to rush the young pitchers, not wanting to rush Quinn Matthews, not going to rush Liam Doyle. You're not rushing, Tink Hence. You can't rush Tekoa Roby because he's coming off Tommy John surgery. So I think they're also going to try to be patient with J.J. Weatherholt, saying that he has a good spring, the way he handled himself in the winter warm-up, the way he handles himself all over the place. I think he has to be on this opening day roster. Now, I think he's going to have to earn that spot. I don't think they're necessarily just going to give it to him again, especially if Donovan's still here, if Gorman's still here. They have options as filling those spots, but this will be a better club if he's playing, again, without having to rush him. If he's ready, he just has to be ready.
And it's the same thing. But be on this team, two people, Brendan Donovan and because, like we said, if Herrera's catching, that opens up a whole different ballgame of options, right? Because it allows you to DH Gorman or DH Donovan or DH a number of different options. Nootbaar, maybe he's ready to hit but not ready to play the field, right? So it really gives you some more options if that's the case. A lot of it comes down to Herrera. And then, like we said, if Donovan's on this team, it makes a difference too.
One of the things I wanted to mention real quickly, one of them we just mentioned in passing, William Doyle, one of the interesting notes I thought that came out of the conversation with Chaim Bloom at the winter warm-up was the fact that we were kind of all assumed that Doyle would be in the big league camp as a non-rostered player based on, how he, came to the organization and his expectation level of high, rankings and prospect rankings, all that. Chaim said, no, Chaim is not going to, they're not going to bring Doyle to the big league camp, at least as a non-roster player. He said you may see him make a couple of cameo appearances in games, coming over from the minor league camp. So that, again, tells me that they're going to be patient and take their time, developing him. And the other news, of course, which, we heard and you can kind of draw your own conclusions about this week, was that Yadier Molina is officially back in the fold as a special assistant to Chaim Bloom and will be working with the team, making some appearances, various things. But as you and I both know, we've been in this position before with Yadi, and I think Yadi is still going to basically do what Yadi wants to do, and we'll see how much he's around.
The big if shows up to the ballpark, if he's there. Now, if he's here, he's a great addition to this club, right? He's very, very knowledgeable and very helpful, and he's going to help into a catcher that can throw that. He's going to do that if he's there, and I think a lot of guys buy into him. And take it or leave, however feel about Ali. I think when Yadi was in the dugout, not just last year, but when he was on the team, I think Yadi had a bigger influence on the whole aspect of this team from a coaching perspective than you think. So I think having Yadi around is going to be helpful if he shows up.
The interesting thing about his schedule is in spring training, you also have to realize that he's managing the Puerto Rico team in the World Baseball Classic. So I'm not sure when their practices are going to start, but if you just look at the schedule portion of their schedule, if their exhibition, they have a couple exhibition games before the pool play starts. So that starts on March the 3rd. And if they go all the way to the championship game, which they might, Puerto Rico will have a good club, that goes to March 17th. So you're talking 2 weeks out of the middle of spring training. So if he's going to be in spring training with the Cardinals, will have to be prior to the 1st of March or sometime after March 18th, which is just a couple of days left before they break camp. So that's going to, I think, limit his availability down to spring training as well.
And the other thing to keep in mind is if Yadi's seriously wanting to be a manager at the major league level, he needs to commit and show up. He needs to show people that he can show up. Well, you're coming on a ball club that only has a manager on a 1-year contract right now. So if he's serious about wanting to put his name in the hat for that, he needs to be here more than he's not.
Of course, you can get this podcast where you can find all of your podcasts on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. Download it on YouTube. Any of those things, anywhere you can go. And if you appreciate you supporting us, appreciate you checking out the newsletter. Of course, all of our other content. You'll look for all of our spring training coverage coming up shortly here from Florida, with the Jupiter Minute coming back again, as well as the postcard from camp. All right, so you mentioned, alluded to earlier right at the start of the show before we wrap up this edition of the podcast about the prospect rankings. MLB.com, MLB Pipeline came up with their top 100 prospects in baseball coming out earlier this week. 5 Cardinals on the list, topped by J.J. Weatherholt at number 5.
There are only 2 teams with more than that. The Mariners having the most, 7. One team was 6. That's around who it was now. But regardless, having 5 in the top 100 is good. And it's interesting when you look at these moves that Heim has made. That was the whole plan, was to get rebuild and restock the minor league system, and now we're starting to do that.
2 in the 30s, Liam Doyle, we mentioned, as well as Rainiel Rodriguez, the young catcher who kind of broke out last year in low A ball. You'll probably see him start this year in Peoria. And then the other catcher, Leonardo Bernal, who was at Double A Springfield last year. I think you'll see him be the everyday catcher at Memphis this year. And then Joshua Baez, who's obviously a great story after being a high-ranked prospect, a second-round draft pick 6 years ago. And then, lo and behold, he kind of fell off those rankings, but had a big bounce-back season last year. So with the Cardinals needing some punch in the outfield, he's going to be a guy to watch in spring training. Not to say that he's going to make this club out of spring training, but he has a chance to show that he's the prospect that everybody thought he was a few years ago.
There's a lot to watch this year in general. They don't necessarily want to use the word rebuild, right, or however you want to do it. But this team is getting younger so they can compete for a long time. And they need the prospects like Baez and like Rainiel Rodriguez to step up and be the guys that we want them to be, to supplement the Jordan Walkers and the Nolan Gormans. And so it's going to be really interesting to watch this entire year to see some of those battles and how these guys progress, because there have been pieces last year to start to rebuild and redevelop this minor league system. And now with Heim's first year, in front of him, it's going to be interesting to see kind of how he chooses to promote those guys or move them around or develop them at that level.
And I think the best thing about watching these guys perform is it's going to be taking place in Jupiter, Florida, not in snowy, cold St. Louis.
I was just looking out the window here, and it is not slowing down at any point in time here. So
look at that blue sky and palm trees down in Palm Beach, everybody. Look at that.
Enough.
Warm up. Yeah, you can get nice and warmed up. So anyway, Mike, we appreciate the visit. Appreciate everybody tuning in to this special edition of Reigns on the Cardinals podcast. Juno Beach is sitting there waiting for you. So just book your plans to get down there now, or get down there as soon as you can for the start of spring training. So it's going to be a good time. So everybody stay safe, stay warm. Have warm thoughts about the Cardinal baseball. Be happy, do good, and watch baseball. That's our new motto. So you can find it on the T-shirts. You can find it everywhere else. So appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll have all the Cardinal news for you covered. If there is another trade between now and spring training, we'll be back with another special edition of Reigns on the Cardinals podcast here on STLSportspage.com.